Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the kind introduction. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here. I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me. We split the work. You have to do reading and listening, whereas I only have to do talking, so I won't read all the slides. And I've got the screens. Circular economy, that's one of the questions that was asked yesterday when I talked to the Committee of the Parliament. Why change? Why change now? I'll try to give you some replies to this question. The circular economy is basically a tool to build stronger regional economies and more resilient communities, because disaster risks are increasing in the industrial economy. And the UN has started with the program on the UN International Strategy for Disaster Risk Reduction, UNISDR. They have started to find strategies to reduce disaster risks in the third world. But in industrialized countries, we are accumulating and even making it worse a number of potential disaster risks that we could prevent if we have another structure, especially a decentralized structure of the economy, for example in energy production. But also in that sense, the circular economy is a less vulnerable structure than the global supply chains of the present economy. Just as a reminder, today's linear industrial economy, the objective is to create value added by managing flows. And it's like a river, and you know that you can't stop a river. So at the point of sale, I can't use a pointer because I can't point it at both sides. If there is too much water, you have a flood. In other words, in the economy, this means you have zero life products, products that go directly from distribution to waste. I don't want to give you the full list. It's about a third of the agricultural produce in the EU, and it's about 50% of all books ever printed every year that are never sold. And similar things happen in many other areas. So the problem with the river economy is you cannot stop it, and you will always have floods and overflows. If we move to the circular economy, which you have to read this diagram from the right to the left, it's reuse, remanufacturing, and recycling. And then you get junctions. You get the junction. Well, reutilization, remarketing is an easy one because you stay very local on utilization. Remanufacturing versus manufacturing has this nice thing that remanufacturing is on average a third cheaper than manufacturing the same new products, same quality. So the junction one is actually advantage circular economy versus the industrial economy. But if you take the junction at base materials, then the advantage is on the side of the raw materials. Because raw materials, they have big fluctuations and they are normally cheaper than secondary materials, simply because secondary materials have a lot of fixed costs and labor costs. So if you think about money and don't forget, this is circular economy, the objective of which is to preserve value by managing stocks, then it's the same as the other economy. Think about money. It's a way, if you do it right, to get rich. So the rules of the circular economy, the smaller the loops, the more profitable. So reuse is more profitable normally than remanufacturing, and that is more profitable than recycling, which doesn't mean you shouldn't do the recycling. Of course you have to do the recycling for waste prevention reasons, but try to find the most profitable solutions. The speed is important. The low speed of the circular flow, the law of reverse compound interest applies. I'll come back to that if you have time, because it takes a bit more time. And the circular economy substitutes manpower for energy. Compared to manufacturing, the circular economy employs considerably more labor, but a huge amount less resources, energy and materials, and that's the reason why, despite the higher labor input, the circular economy is normally more profitable than manufacturing. So, what are the business models of a circular economy? It concerns all infrastructure, buildings, many durable goods, and catalytic goods such as lube oils. I'll let you read this. What are the drivers of the circular economy? And you can see the drivers are mostly today legislation. Either a legislation on the resource exploitation, mining industry, and not only legislation by parliaments, also people like the US Security and Exchange Commission are now putting rules. The UN Mercury Agreement, you may not have heard of, from 2020 onwards, nobody will be allowed to, if the UN has a say, to produce any new mercury, which means the mercury mines will be closed, and we will have to live with the stock of mercury that we have worldwide. EU Marshall Plan for Rare Earth Elements is that we have realized there is some, actually rare earth elements are not rare, they are everywhere. Problem is, it's very expensive to extract them, and it's a very dirty business. That's why basically only Chinese do it, but that means that if we want REs and the Chinese don't want to sell us, then we have a problem. So resource security in the middle, resource security is the one thing that is now haunting politicians and corporates alike. What do we do if we run out of certain strategic materials? And of course, the other driver, which is not on this, as I said, is money. If you can make money out of used goods, because I don't use the term waste, because waste is basically our unwillingness or incapability to develop methods to reuse goods, reuse materials. So it's an intellectual challenge, it's not an environmental problem. And as we are in the EU, I mean not Switzerland, I'm Swiss, but you are in the EU. but then we don't really have industry. So, the EU Waste Directive that should be finally transformed into national legislation by the end of this year clearly stipulates the priority of waste management is waste prevention. And the tools to do this is reusing goods, extending the service life of goods and components, and the member states will be obliged to install take-back, non-destructive take-back systems in order to facilitate, to feed the industry, the circular economy, with the resources that they need. So you can imagine that it's easy to write it, but it will not be so easy to actually put it into practice. And just a reminder, nanotechnology, many of these rare earth elements are used in nanotechnology applications. And normally, nanotechnology applications, you cannot recover the molecules. So therefore, you will have, or we will have to design products, especially electronic products, in a way that will allow the reuse of components, because that's the only way to recover the molecules, one lined up behind the other one. Why should we change now? In industrialized countries, we are not talking about India or China, but in industrialized countries, for many goods, we have now reached a situation where we have saturated markets. And saturated markets you can recognize by the fact that the number of goods sold, or in this case cars in Germany, new car registrations, is the same number as the cars scrapped. Which means the stock of cars we have, the fleet of cars we have, is actually sufficient for our needs. So instead of continuing to produce more cars every year and scrap the same number, we could actually develop methods to better manage the stock of cars we have, develop technologies to technologically update them, which is a completely different business model from producing cars and scrapping cars. But it's also overall, especially for the consumer, it would be a more profitable or more beneficial. What does that mean? What's the impact of keeping a car longer? Don't look in the literature or in the academic circles for this information. You have to have your own car to do it. So this is my Toyota from 1969. And you have the pie chart on the left is the cost analysis after 10 years. You can see factory was 2/3, otherwise the sales price. The labor was 18%. After 20 years, you get the Mercedes star. Now you know where the Mercedes star comes from. So it's 1/3 sales price, 1/3 labor, 1/3 parts. And after 30 years, according to the World Trade Organization rules, this Toyota has become a Swiss car, because 50% of all expenses have been made in Switzerland. So the longer you use a product, or you repair and operate maintenance product, the higher the labor input, simply because during operation and maintenance, about 80% of the costs is labor, local labor, and about 20% is parts. So service life extension is actually a strategy to create local labor and relatively skilled labor. There's also a quality angle to the circular economy is a high quality world. If you look at the perhaps not typical products, but of some of the products that live forever, such as Stradivari instruments and expensive watches, they don't live forever because they were designed that way, but because they go through periodic maintenance, periodic rebuilding, sometimes technological upgrading. And the reason why people do this is a caring attitude. Stradivari keeps on living because somebody wants to keep it alive and cares for the quality of the instrument. There is an environmental angle. I'll let you read the details, but it's a study that was done in 2004 on the sector of restoring used automotive engines compared to a like-new condition and compared to manufacturing new engines. The result was lower, it's cheaper. The Riemann engines are 30 to 50% cheaper. The raw material consumption is up to 90% less. The waste generation is up to 90% less. Lower emissions, whatever you look at, it's remanufacturing compared to manufacturing is with a huge distance more intelligent. Which doesn't mean that if the technology changes and if we move from combustion engines to electric cars, then of course Riemann will still be necessary for vintage cars, but no longer doesn't make sense to keep the old technology in general use if a better alternative comes up. Another reason why the bottom red line, 100 million tons of greenhouse gas reductions, is what was achieved with a great expense by the German government with the German energy feed-in tariff law. In other words, the Germans are extremely proud of moving to a low-carbon electricity production. But you can see 100 million tons by moving, these are actually from RAP, the study from RAP. If you move the UK economy to a circular economy, you would reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 800 million tons, 8 times what the Germans have achieved, and without the huge subsidies. The performance economy, I'll come to that, would be 550 million tons in addition. So the circular economy has a huge potential to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And the important thing again of free marketing and reuse, think dollars, don't think waste. Lufthansa, the seats in the D-check of all the aircraft have to be changed, and traditionally the task was to find the cheapest recycle. And then there was a new manager, and he said, no, I try to find somebody who pays me for these seats. It's leather seats, lightweight, nothing wrong with them except that we don't want them anymore. And now Lufthansa is selling these seats to architects who build theaters, cinemas, open-air festivals, whatever you want. And they get, instead of paying about $30 or 30 euros per seat, they now get about 300 euros per seat. So think money. This is not waste. these used seats is something that Lufthansa no longer wants, needs, but that doesn't mean that you have to throw it away. So drivers for change. I'd come back to the social innovations, caring as equality, the teddy bears, but rising resource prices, I will also come back. There are a number of changes, but the one that has woken up even McKinsey, which has now discovered the circular economy, is that from 1900 to 2000, resource prices have gone down. And now we are higher than we were in 1900. So this thing has changed. Resource prices are suddenly going up very rapidly. So the performance economy, is driven by corporate strategy, not legislation. And it is the most profitable form of the circular economy, and it has an additional environmental benefit because it internalizes the cost of risk and the cost of waste over the full life of a product. In order to exploit the performance economy selling goods and services, you have to think in systems, not in products. And here you have one of the revolutionary inventions, the lighthouse, which has improved shipping more than any other technical innovation in ships. So make the risk visible and people will not run their ship on the rock. It achieves, the performance economy achieves the highest resource efficiency as it maintains the ownership of goods. But if you maintain the ownership of a good as an economic actor, you also internalize the liabilities. This is an example, private finance initiatives, the Pont de Millau, a long life design. The only money, Effiage, the owner, builder, constructor, operator of this bridge, the only money they get is the toll for 75 years of the vehicles going over the bridge. And so if you know that, then you build something that really lasts, because you will not want to spend a lot of money on maintaining the structure over the 75 years. For other goods, it means modular system design with standardized components. For infrastructure, it obviously means long life design. Where do corporate customers buy goods and services? It's a long list, this is only part of it. But maybe the examples people are least aware of is, for example, a Michelin selling tire use by the mile to haulage companies and all the US Armed Forces. They have a 10-year contract with the Pentagon to supply tires to the US Army wherever the vehicles are or the aircraft, and the only money they get back is per landing of an aircraft, a fixed fee, or per 100 miles. They have started doing this now for haulage companies. We can discuss maybe later how Michelin has completely changed the way they design and now maintain tires, because now they want to produce as little tires as possible, because production costs money. They want to give tires that last longer and are cheaper to repair and maintain, because that's how you increase your profit margin. Same for Rolls-Royce selling power by the hour. Let's go back to the pioneer of reuse. Reuse needs a corporate reuse strategy. It doesn't function in the industrial economy. And you can see it's basically three things you have to change. It's the delivery business process, it's the design of the products, and it's develop an effective return process. Because this is the really hard thing, and effective return processes means you have to decentralize your business. You cannot do this in a global approach. You have to go regional. You have to apply the circular economy principles. Where do consumers buy utilization? Basically anywhere where you have a shared utilization, such as public transport, or where you, instead of buying something, you rent something. Maybe one of the most amazing recent developments is the last bullet point, luxury handbag rentals. You have now, I think it's now more than a dozen companies all over the world. If you want a Gucci handbag to show off for a weekend party, don't buy these things that cost £3,000. Rent them for about £50 for a weekend, and everybody believes that you are a really important person. Some people do the same trick with Ferraris and other expensive cars. So if you see somebody in a Ferrari, don't forget there is a 10% chance that he is the owner of the car. What are the drivers of change for the performance economy? Again, innovations, but also public procurement. One reason why, for example, in space services, such as the space shuttle, NASA no longer buys hardware, they buy services. That has led to a dozen new innovative startup companies in the States that are producing space services for NASA. And the corporate resource autonomy, the driver is, if resource prices really will continue to rise, then if you retain the ownership, the goods in the market today are your resources of tomorrow at yesterday's resource prices. So ownership becomes a profitable proposal, and then of course you internalize also the waste. So the waste industry becomes a service industry to the fleet owners of the goods, and is no longer independent. Third point, stock as societal wealth. I think the real wealth of societies is based on stocks, not flows. So the GDP is actually a nice indication of throughput, but it doesn't tell you anything about stocks, about wealth. And you need to know the quantity and quality of the stock, and you see there's a number of stocks. The principle of stock management is caring. It's not technology, it's caring. And caring is labor-intensive, decentralized, has to be done where the clients are. Examples are education, health services. And it would allow us to, if you had the statistics, to redefine growth. because if the stocks increase in quality and quantity, we have growth without production. But we have to use other strategies. So caring is basically socio-cultural innovation, new stewardship, relation with goods. There are some companies, for example, it's Patek Philippe, a Swiss-German Geneva-based watch manufacturer. The publicity for years has been, you never actually own a Patek Philippe, you merely look after it for the next generations. And so therefore, it will never become waste. Now, here are some of my teddy bears. What are your teddy bears? And I'm coming to the last point. Sorry. Creating sustainable framework conditions. The present framework conditions, including taxation, are made to promote the industrial economy. Now, don't get me wrong. The industrial economy 200 years ago was the most efficient way to overcome scarcities of food, scarcities of infrastructure, scarcities of products. The problem is, and this is still the case in less developed countries, the problem is once you have reached saturation in markets, then the industrial economy no longer solves the problem of creating more wealth. And so therefore, we need to seriously adapt, change the framework conditions to the new condition, to the circular economy. And the other reason to do this is there are very few resources that can be improved and that deteriorate. And the most valuable one is human labor and its accumulated experience, skills. If you leave a ton of coal or oil another 10 years in the soil, it will not deteriorate. If you do not employ young people for the next 10 years, they will be unemployable when you need them in 10 years. So the society, the government should give priority to intelligently using all the labor they have, including silver workers. And that means the economy should be adapted in a way that you can match the human capital with the manufactured capital, with the acquired capital, skills, experience, and the only tool I know to do this is the circular economy. So that means the circular economy here is in the center of the diagram. The circular economy has a very positive impact on resource security, on job creation, and on greenhouse gas emissions reduction. The best way to foster the circular economy is sustainable taxation. Do not tax human labor. Tax unwanted things, tax non-renewable resources, and the circular economy will thrive in all forms without any subsidies or any incentive programs. And the same thing if you put the regional caring activities in the center, which is education, health, you have seen it before, then the regional caring activities promote, thrive on whatever you want, human capital and cultural capital, natural capital, manufactured capital, embodied resources. And the best way to promote these regional caring activities is again sustainable taxation, because caring is labor intensive. Old age care, long-time care, education, you can take any caring activity, circular economy, it is labor intensive and it is regional. And the best and most discreet way to promote caring activity, or the development of caring activities, is sustainable taxation. So, conclusions. I didn't talk about obstacles. One of the obstacles is the missing university curricula. For example, operation and maintenance engineering is something that you obviously need people to do this. And if you want to, many of the infrastructures in hydroelectricity, for example, are between 50 and 100 years old. If you want to remanufacture, if you want to maintain these infrastructures, you need people who know this technology. So you can actually not use young people coming from universities today, because they know everything about electronic controls, but who give them a mechanical or electromechanical control system, and they don't know what they're supposed to do with it. So this is the reason why in the circular economy there is space for civil workers, for people who have the knowledge and the experience of the past technologies. And that's just the publicity. There is a book where you can read all these things with many examples. And thank you for listening.